What do I do? What do I do? In the name of God, you've got to tell me!
For a new player to Stellaris, or possibly even a returning or an old player to Stellaris, the number of DLC in the game can feel a little overwhelming. Don't worry, I have got you covered though. Today in this video, we're going to break down all the DLC on offer for Stellaris in a tier list and talk about which ones I think you should get first, which ones you should get second, and which ones you probably don't even need to buy at all. The way we're going to rank all of this DLC content is by putting it in order of what it really brings to the game, how it's going to change your experience, and how necessary it is to get a full and complete experience of Stellaris. There is also the cost of each DLC to take into account, and I have marked that on the chart. Now, I'm not going to talk in specific currency units, but I'm going to talk about the low price DLC. That's the very bottom tier in euros. They're around 7 euros off the top of my head. Then we've got the medium price, that's around 10 euros, and the high price, which is double of that at 20. So depending on where you are in the world, there are going to be some different prices there. And on top of that, it depends whether or not you're buying them in a sale and what is on sale specifically during that point. That then does mean that there will be some items lower down in this list because they don't add very much content to the game, or at least I don't think they're very necessary for a full experience, which I actually might recommend you buy, or you might really want to buy, because they're so very, very cheap. We are going to start, as ever, right at the bottom here in the F tier now. The F tier, I believe, is filled with DLC that basically you could probably ignore if you wanted to. It's not going to add any fundamental changes to the overall game that you couldn't completely do without. Yes, there are some nice things added that you might want to get. You might be really interested in some of the specifics here. But overall, any changes added are, as I said, either very minor, or if they're large, they really don't impact the game very often. You don't really get to use them very much. And that leads me on quite nicely to the first DLC in this tier, and that is Nemesis. So Nemesis allows you to both become the Crisis. You can take the Crisis Ascension perk and become the endgame Crisis in the galaxy, which on the surface is an interesting and fun way to play. The other thing you can do is become the Galactic Custodian, and that can evolve into being the Galactic Imperium and doing all of the Star Wars prequel memeing. But both of these options tend to have very little impact until the late game. That is, the Empire specifically is a very late game thing that usually doesn't come about until you've probably won the game already. And then becoming the Crisis is a very specific playstyle. The replayability there, I don't think, is very high. Once you've done it a couple of times, it's not really something that you're going to want to repeat again. So overall, the two main features of this DLC, becoming the Crisis and Galactic Custodian, they don't come into play until quite late, and on top of that, they're not highly replayable. You do get some extra bits and pieces here. You get a new ship set, which is very nice, probably one of the main redeeming features of this DLC, and you get access to extra espionage missions. But those extra espionage missions at the moment aren't very fleshed out. Most players generally completely ignore them. So the main thing you're getting here is really that extra ship set for most of your games, and for the high price tag that it comes in, I don't really think it's that worth it. This is a DLC you will want to get if you've really run out of other things to pick up, or you are desperate to do some of the memeing. The next three DLC in this tier are all species packs. All of these three species packs are of the lowest price tier, so even though I rate them quite low down here, they are relatively easy to pick up, and they will provide you with some interesting changes. Let's find out what each of these will do. So the first one here, Necroids. This basically lets you live out your undead vampire fantasies, or if you're a Star Trek Voyager fan, the Kobali species would be a dead ringer for this. This is because you get the necrophage origin, which allows you to have a powerful primary species that consumes others, turning them into their primary species. And this origin allows you to do some interesting things. You also get 3 new civics, Death Cult, Reanimated Armies, and Memorialists, which is cool, and 16 great new portraits, 15 organic and 1 robotic. What is very nice about this species pack is that you aren't tied to using the necrophage origin with each of the portraits. You can play with a Necroid portrait and not have to take that origin, so it isn't locked in that way. You also get a new ship set, a new city set, new name lists, new building appearances, and new advisor voiceover, so it is quite a nice little contained species pack. But as I mentioned before, the reason it's down here is you could never play with this and you wouldn't really notice you were missing out on anything in Stellaris. The Lithoid pack is quite similar to the Necroid pack, but you actually get a little bit less. You're going to be able to play as a Lithoid or rock species. This gives you 15 new Lithoid portraits and 1 Lithoid robot portrait, however. Unlike the Necroid pack, if you play with the Lithoid portraits, you're tied into some specific Lithoid traits. They reduce your growth speed, increase your habitability, and make your pops live longer and fight a little bit harder. Overall, I generally don't play with this DLC, basically hardly ever. I do like some of the mineral-based ship models, and the voice pack's interesting. Even when you do combine this with their unique civic, Terravore, if you're a Lithoid hive mind and you want to go down the determined exterminator kind of route and just eat all of the planets around you. And as well, there is the Calamitous Birth origin, which is something of a unique playstyle in that you get to play with these interesting colony ships that slam into planets that only cost minerals. But overall, again, this is a take it or leave it kind of DLC that has minor impacts on playstyle at best. Finally, in the F tier, we have the Plantoids Species Pack. For a long time, this was my least favorite DLC, and even though the Custodian team, the developer team, have made some changes and there are improvements to this DLC since its release, it still is pretty much my least favorite DLC. What does it give you? Well, it allows you to play as plant-like species. You get access to 15 Plantoid portraits, a Plantoid cityscape, and a ship set for civilian and military Plantoid ships, which is all kind of nice. But overall, those changes are pretty much entirely cosmetic, so it is very much take it or leave it. There are a couple of civics and new species traits added, catalytic processing and idyllic bloom. I don't think those are particularly interesting, though they do offer some slightly interesting playstyle. There is a slight change up here with catalytic processing. Then there are the new species traits, phototrophic, radiotrophic, and budding. Budding is quite a powerful trait, and phototrophic can be used in some interesting builds, so it could be nice to get this if you want to change things up a small amount, but these are relatively small changes to an overall playstyle that you're probably not going to repeat very often. Of course, like anything in this tier list, if you are massively into the idea of playing as Plantoids, just completely ignore me, go out and buy that DLC. I'm simply trying to rank these how I see fit in terms of what they bring to the game and what will most impact your play experience. And of course, if you're enjoying this video, please download that like button. The items here in the C tier have a little bit more replayability, there is a little bit more depth, you're going to get a little more bang for your buck, or alternatively, I think you'll find the reusability a little bit higher because the features included are a little bit more powerful and you're going to want to include them in some more of your games. So what do we have here? The first thing, which I think may be a little controversial, is the Apocalypse DLC. Now, I know Apocalypse does hold a place in the hearts of many, many people, and it holds some interesting features, which we'll talk about now. So the first and probably most important thing is you're going to get your hands on a Death Star, or a Colossus, as it's called in Stellaris, when you take the Apocalypse DLC. You'll also get access to Titan-class ships, a class of ship slightly larger than a battleship, which adds auras into the game. Apocalypse also includes the Marauder clans, space nomads and raiders who settle on the fringes of civilization, and at some point you could end up with a Great Khan spawning and getting a mid-game crisis that way. There are a couple of extra civics and ascension perks included in here too, but the main things are this planet destroyer, the Colossus, and the Titan ships. This, I do feel at the moment, is not really a feature you necessarily need to have. If you really want an expansion to some of the warfare mechanics, absolutely take this DLC. For you, it's probably A tier. But in my opinion, the actual extra bits and pieces it adds don't really justify the high price tag it comes with, because it's really only 2 main features. Next up, we have the Stellaris Overlord DLC. You might be surprised that this, the newest DLC for Stellaris, is down here in the C tier as well. Why is that? Well, first off, It basically isn't on sale anywhere at any time yet, meaning it is pretty much the most expensive DLC by leaps and bounds. Yes, if you're buying DLC when there isn't a sale on, which I probably wouldn't recommend you do, then Overlord probably factors possibly a little bit higher, but I have to take into account the hefty price tag this DLC currently comes with. And speaking of sales, whenever the DLC are on sale, that is pretty much the best time to get your hands on them. So if you'd like to get a discount, and if you'd also like to support this channel, you can currently purchase the DLC until Friday the 5th of August on sale on the Humble Bundle store by following the link down in the description below. Humble Bundle offers a few ways to redeem the products they sell, including getting your hands on a Steam key, which you can then redeem on your Steam account. So if you want to buy any of the DLC, follow the link down in the description below. The main two features of Overlord that you're going to be using the most are the orbital rings, which add new defense and economy options for your planets, and hyper relays that allow you to move around the galaxy much faster. They kind of act like a space autobahn later in the game. The other things you're going to get here is one new megastructure, quantum catapult, which isn't that useful, 5 new origins, which if the game is getting a little stale for you, could be quite interesting ways to play. There is 3 new enclaves included, and on top of that, some interesting new vassalization mechanics to make specialist vassals. At the moment, being a bulwark vassal is pretty much the most powerful way to play the game, so this isn't that awful. It's just for the hefty price tag, I don't think, whilst there are many features here, I can realistically recommend you go out and spend the maximum price on Stellaris Overlord. I'd recommend you wait until it's on sale if you really want it. Humanoids is another species pack, so this is a very cheap DLC, but why is it up here in the C tier and not down below in the F tier? Well, I have a personal sweet spot for this one. I do quite like the art style of the humanoid ship set and the humanoid portraits. I tend to find I use them quite a bit. They are, for me, slightly more replayable than the other ones down below. That's why they're up here a bit higher. On top of that, you get access to the Clone Army Origin, which at the moment is pretty much the most powerful origin in the game. It's phenomenally broken, as well as the Master Artificer's Civic or Masterful Crafter's Civic. That is a fantastic civic that is highly replayable because it's really good. And then there's Pleasure Seekers and Pompous Purists. Now, if you're a player that hates the fact the AI keeps spamming you with requests, Pompous Purists means that AI empires cannot initiate diplomacy with you. You must initiate diplomacy with them, meaning you will no longer ever be spammed with needless diplomatic requests. As a quality of life improvement, that is really good. So for all of that, I do think it fits in slightly higher in the C tier here, though it is the bottom of the C tier. Finally, there is the Aquatic Species Pack. This is the last species pack to be covered in this tier list. There are no species packs higher up. And again, that's because I don't think that you necessarily need them. These are niche cosmetic additions that you can add to the game if you want to, and luckily they do come with quite a low price tag. Bear in mind that Aquatics at the moment is a slightly higher price tag than the rest of them at around 30% more, so do bear that in mind. Aquatics comes with 2 fantastic origins, the first of which, Here Be Dragons, is fantastic if you're really into dragons and want some dragon-based roleplay. You start with an Ether Drake Leviathan in your home system. And then there is the Ocean Paradise start, letting you start with a chonky size 30 planet. You get the Angler Civic, which is great for any fishing roleplays, and the Hydrocentric Ascension perk, giving you access to the Deluge Colossus and Ice Mining Stations. You do of course get a nice species portrait set, the Aquatic Portrait, and 1 aquatic themed robotic portrait, along with a really nice ship set that I use quite a lot, one of the best advisor voices in the game, the Pirate Advisor voice, and some of the best name lists in the game. Aquatic 2 and Aquatic 4 are pretty much my favorite name lists in Stellaris. So that's why I've put this one slightly higher than some of the other species packs here in the C tier, but similar to humanoids, it is right at the bottom of this tier. But what do you think about this tier list? Do you agree with my placing? Let me know down in the comments below. Now we're in the B tier, we are finally getting our teeth into some DLC that adds some pretty fundamental and sweeping changes to the game and the playstyle you'll be playing, whilst also possibly bringing in some really important tropes you're not going to want to miss out on. The Megacorp DLC allows you to play as a Megacorp civilization. That is one in which the businesses have completely overtaken the apparatus of the state and are in charge of everything. This is a unique playstyle that lets you build branch offices, embark on interesting trade agreements, and basically gives you a slightly different way to play Stellaris, allowing you to play tall a bit more than you would play wide. You also get access to Ecumenopolis or city worlds like Coruscant in Stellaris, which are some of the best, well, they are the best planet types in the game. The Caravaneers are included in this, whilst yes, you can do some interesting things with them. Generally, I find them a little bit annoying. You do get access to some fantastic megastructures, the matter decompressor, the mega art installation, and the strategic coordination center. You will get the galactic slave market included, which is something interesting and has now been fixed in the latest patches. Previously, the AI empires would buy up all of the slaves in the slave market before you even got a chance. Now, however, that isn't the case. There is also a few ascension perks and a bit of new music included here as well. Megacore is, yes, one of the higher priced DLCs, but because of the interesting playstyles you're going to be adding, not just for you, but for other non-player empires in the game, I really do think this is one of the best DLC to get when we compare it to all of the previous DLC we've talked about so far in this list. Synthetic Dawn is one of the mid-tier DLC with regards to price, however, it does bring you a massive change. It allows you to have a unique playstyle, and that is playing as a machine intelligence empire. Similar to Megacorp, you're going to be getting a unique playstyle that also gives you unique other bonuses in the game. Now, on top of that, yes, there is slightly less content in this DLC than Megacorp, but it's half the price at the medium tier, and I think that's an important thing to note. You also get access to some new event chains and story features, including AI, as well as the Machine Rebellion or Rise of the Machines. There are some synthetic race portraits added, and there is an expansion for the voice pack of Via the Virtual Assistant. Overall, you're going to be buying this DLC because you want to get your hands on the machine intelligence species type and play as that unique civilization, which is a unique way to play Stellaris. So if you're not interested in playing as machines, this isn't a DLC for you. The A tier contains DLC which, although you might not automatically pick them as your first DLC when you're buying DLC for Stellaris, they will usually, I believe, come in as a second or possibly third choice as an addition to the roster of expansion content you've chosen. The Federations DLC unlocks a whole host of expanded options for Federations, allowing you to build up some of the unique Federation types and giving you access to all of the benefits you'll get from that. Additionally, you'll get a whole host of extra options for the Galactic Community and Galactic Community Resolutions, which I have a definite soft spot for. I think intergalactic politics is an important part of the game. This DLC also unlocks the most origins of any DLC. I think it unlocks at least 8 different unique new origins that you can play with, giving you a whole host of replayability options, as well as some fantastic new constructions. You'll get access to the Juggernaut, which is the largest ship type in the game, technically larger than a Colossus, although you can't build Colossus with them. A Juggernaut is basically a massive mobile starbase that provides auras and things like that. You can also build the Mega Shipyard Mega Structure, which is one of the best mega structures in the game and pretty much essential for dealing with the times 25 or possibly even times 10 crisis if you want to play the game on some of the highest difficulty levels. I think that Federations is the diplomacy-based DLC to Apocalypse, though it does, I believe, come with more content and actually have some combat-related things like the Juggernaut that you can't otherwise get. There are also 2 story packs in the A tier here, the Leviathans and the Ancient Relics story pack. Leviathans, I would say, is slightly better than Ancient Relics, and why is that? Well, with Leviathans, you're going to get a whole host of Guardians or Leviathans out there in the galaxy, giant alien entities that you will have to meet and probably deal with because they're absolutely monstrous. It also puts the Enclaves in the game, the basic Enclaves, which are really quite an important part, and later on, it gives you access to the War in Heaven mechanics, which is when fallen empires awake and start fighting it out, duking it out as a war in heaven, proverbially. Now, this also gives you some extra portraits. The gecko, butterfly, starfish, snail alien, and mushroom portraits are all part of this DLC. So it's not only a story pack, but also a species portraits pack. On top of all of that, it also includes new events and encounters, which will give you a big increase to the replayability of the game, because you won't be stuck after completing the game a few times with the same events over and over again. The biggest feature I would say with Ancient Relics is that it gives you the inclusion of Relic Worlds. Relic Worlds are really cool, and even without the Megacorp DLC, if you have Relic Worlds, you can turn them into an Ecumenopolis, which is actually generally better than taking the Ecumenopolis Ascension perk. So that's something quite cool. You'll also get minor artifacts that you can do some interesting things with, along with a whole bunch of ancient relics that give your empire some really cool and powerful abilities during the game if you can find them. On top of that, you'll also get all these archaeology sites added into the game, which are really quite interesting. And yes, they in themselves don't have that much replayability, but by adding in a whole bunch of extra archaeology sites when you get this DLC, you'll get a bit more variety. This also introduces 2 new precursor civilizations, so if you're getting bored with all of the precursor civilizations that come with the base game, this is quite a nice fun little expansion pack. Just like the Leviathans, this adds lots of content that boosts the replayability of the base game, and therefore I think it's a really good DLC to get, and that's why it's up here in the A tier. Well, we've made it quite a long way through all of these DLC. We are now at the end of the A tier, about to jump into the S tier. If you're still with me, this is the call out, this is the secret call out. Let me know down in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. But now in the S tier, what have we got? Well, basically the S tier contains DLC that I think are the first and kind of automatic pick. In some way, without these DLC, the game actually doesn't really feel like Stellaris. It feels like there have been important features scooped out. So to get a good playing experience, I'd actually recommend you pick up any DLC in this S tier before you even play your first game. Don't try to do anything else. I mean, yes, the base game is all right, but these really do take it into what I would class as proper Stellaris. The Utopia DLC is the best DLC for Stellaris. It's also the first one they released and fits in a whole bunch of extra stuff that I would suspect they wanted to include in the base game, but due to production related issues probably got pushed off into this first DLC, or maybe they just wanted to monetize the extra content. I'm not going to make a judgment on that, but I am going to tell you that you pretty much need to buy it. What does it include? Well, you get access to the megastructures, a lot of the base ones, including Dyson spheres and ring worlds. You get access to habitats, allowing you to play tall, so to speak, and build star bases that people can actually live on anywhere, any system in your empire, even if you don't have the planets. And that can be really important in the mid to late game if you want to keep expanding and growing your civilization, but you don't want to go to war. You also get access to the 3 ascension paths, the biological, synthetic, and psionic ascension paths that allow you to basically transcend the galaxy, transcend the universe, and do some interesting things. You get access to some unique mechanics that allow you to interact with primitive civilizations like indoctrination. You get access to the advanced slavery types, allowing you to specialize your slaves. And if you've not played Stellaris before, let me tell you, slavery is not only an economic necessity, it's an imperative for many empires in the game. And so being able to customize the type of slavery you have is really important. You also get access to advanced government types. You get unique civics and authorities for your government. You get to play as fanatic purifiers, for example. And on top of that, you get access to the hive mind government type, which is a Gestalt consciousness, which is a really unique and interesting way to play that is essential for a rounded experience, in my opinion. You also get a few cool origins and some extra music. Overall, this is the meatiest DLC, and whenever there is a sale, this one is always on sale with pretty much the biggest reduction going. So if you're going to buy a DLC, Utopia is the first and foremost DLC you should get your hands on. And then we have the other side of the coin here, which is Distant Stars. Where Utopia should be an auto pick #1 buy it with the base game, Distant Stars, I can see the merits for not getting it straight away. However, I think this is a good second pick. It adds a fundamental amount of replayability to Stellaris. It unlocks the most, or includes the most, new events and anomalies for any DLC in the game. You're going to get dozens of extra new bits and pieces added in with this that will increase the variety of events and anomalies you find, and that I think is really essential essential for an interesting 4X game like Stellaris. You also got the L gate and L cluster mechanics included, which could trigger a crisis in the mid game, which is really quite a fun one to have in there, though sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's a little bit more esoteric. There are some fun options there. On top of that, you get a whole bunch of unique systems included in the game, each with their own unique stories to tell. And just like the Leviathans DLC, you get access to some gargantuan Leviathan creatures, which are included in this. So, it is half the price of Utopia at the medium price, and I think that's an important thing to note here. And that means between this and Utopia while on sale, it's generally a little bit cheaper or around the same price as buying the base game of Stellaris. And I think that you should definitely go out and get Distant Stars if you're feeling the game has got a little stale, that you're expecting the events or the anomalies that pop up, and you're no longer reading the click boxes, just simply clicking through them. This will double that level of replayability, and generally speaking, I think it's a fantastic DLC. If you're interested in seeing these DLC all used and played together in a single game of Stellaris, check out my Extreme One System Challenge, where I try to win the game by only taking a single system and never expanding beyond my initial borders. You can do that by clicking the video on screen now.